never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance.
Right. Grab it. Here, let me get you some baby powder, Rob, so you can get into your spandex.
Thank you, Matt. I'm receiving
your
word.
cape.
It's the mayor. He's on the phone, and there's
Oh God, the mayor.
the jokester. He's attacking the bank. What are you going to do?
Not the jokester and the clue clown. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in my spandex. I've got my gloves. I'm perched atop a flagpole overlooking the generically named city of Citytropolis, and I'm ready to do superhero shit.
You don't mean Freedom City?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, Metroville, whatever town it is that we're looking at here. Hello everyone. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob. And today we're going to be talking about mutants and masterminds, superheroes, heroes of the Silver and Golden Age.
Or if you want to get a little dark, you can, all the accumulated filth of their sex and murder will foam up to their waists, and the politicians will look up and they will shout, "Save us!" And I'll look down and whisper,
"No."
That's right. You can get dark with it.
Get dark with it. Yes. If you've ever wanted to annoy everybody else at the table by screaming, "You're not locked in. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me." This is the game for you. Yeah. You could also have fun and do goofy voices like we did, or you could be an edgelord and make everyone unhappy.
Those are your
only
two options. Yeah, you can either do a mid-Atlantic 40s accent and talk about
you
the
can have
American
gangsters
way.
that talk like this. See?
Yeah, or you can be Rorschach and rant about good men like my father or President Truman.
That's right. Yeah, it's either you're saying, it's the Dark Crusader, get him, boys, or you're growling in a deep voice and I'm gonna hang you from the side of a building and torture you until you tell me where's the jokester.
Yeah, where's the jokester? So it's crazy that we haven't talked about a superhero game.
We really
people have asked for this, and sorry, but now we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I kind of assumed that we had talked about superheroes or a superhero game before, but I guess we haven't. And it's funny because we talked a lot about all sorts of other things, but we haven't talked much about superheroes, which given the environment that we live in is kind of wacky. Matt, how do you feel about superheroes, heroes with powers? What are our thoughts on the genre of supers, as it were?
I love it. I think it overall lends itself very well to any sort of tabletop role-playing game. The great thing is it's the other genre where everyone knows exactly what's going on, especially because you can sort of establish a range of, like Rob said, not just from dark to grimdark to cosmic adventure to time travel to super science to heists to the misunderstood that are both feared and loathed by the general populace, but work in the secret darkness to protect people.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
We were making jokes, but the great thing about superheroes is that there's actually a ton of story types and tones that you can go for. The third that you can do is where it's the Whedon story. You everybody's cracking wise. You got to say, oh well, that happened every time. So
no,
those are the only three options: is dark and gritty, goofy 40s, or Joss Whedon. That's the only type of superhero story you can tell. No, jokes.
The interdimensional alien ants have a giant space laser now?
They have a space laser now.
Actually, that's a great idea for a hero.
is
Maybe don't actually call it Dr. Whedon, but yeah, it's just
the guy who makes annoying observations and
he can be an NPC superhero who gets like a energy hole burned through his chest.
Insists on only going around in bare feet, no matter what. Anyway, back on topic.
Yeah,
the
superhero
thing about
stories.
Superheroes is that you really can tell a lot of different types of stories, and we'll get into, I think, what makes this great for tabletop, but just in terms of constructing a sort of a shared narrative. We talked about this when we were talking about horror games, and we've talked about this with D&D, but it really helps to have kind of a touchstone or a shared archetypal narrative that everybody knows and understands. And in the context that we're mostly operating in, everybody knows superheroes, right? So everybody kind of gets what's happening. You don't have to sit down and say, okay, so the reason this man has a cape is because, everyone gets it, right? You're like, you're a superhero, and you don't have to explain anything. You say you're, in the city of Metropolis, and you have to fight bad guys, and everybody immediately knows kind of what their role is and how to tell that story. And which is what makes, I think, one of the many things that makes superhero games such a great fit for tabletop.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. There's a big range of genres, and segueing from the genre to the systems that are available, there's also a huge range of systems, right?
And I wanted to ask you about this, Matt.
Yeah.
So, full disclosure, listeners, I have played in a few of these, and I enjoy a superhero game. I've never GM'd any superhero games. Matt has more than I have, and so Matt, yeah. I'm wondering, why. Well, what's available to us? Why Mutants and Masterminds over something else? And what lends itself, I guess, to this type of gameplay?
Well. And I'm not gonna sit here and I'm too tired of having this conversation in general, but argue that Mutants and Masterminds is the best system for superheroes.
Sure,
it's
sorry, I'm not trying to make you stake your claim in.
But there are a lot of different systems, right? There are some really interesting ones. There are some that are incredibly rules heavy, incredibly have oh man, I can tweak my custom powers and I know exactly what they do. Things like champions from the Hero 6th edition system. There are some that are really, really rules light and narrative heavy, like Icon, or I'm especially thinking of Marvel superheroic role-playing. And there are some that are somewhere in between that are new, and I haven't exactly decided where they fall in, like Sentinels. There are some that focus on one specific type of superhero story, like Masks: A New Generation, which focuses on young superheroes. So there's a lot you could pick. I think why we picked Mutants and Masterminds is because it's the one I've run the most, and it's the one I think you've played in.
It's the one I've played in too, yeah.
It may be, I don't actually think I could argue this, but I feel like people have argued it in the past, is if you've played Dungeons and Dragons, it feels very familiar because it's built on the Dungeons and Dragons system.
This is one thing I was going to bring up, and I have a lot more to say about this because I actually think there's some very, very important differences, but the core, you roll a d20, and most of this looks familiar if you've played Dungeons and Dragons, especially 5th edition. There's a lot of similarities. Mutants
and Masterminds did a bunch of things that 5th edition decided to do before 5th edition before Dungeons and Dragons decided to do it.
Yeah, and frankly, I wish that 5th edition had borrowed more from Mutants and Masterminds, because as we'll talk about, I think that not getting too far ahead of myself, but I really have, from a nerd standpoint, I'm increasingly not enjoying D20 based systems. I just the whole D20 is kind of a swingy dice. I'm more and more often I'm preferring rolling different numbers of, smaller dice for less, dramatic failures and successes. But Mutants and Masterminds does a really good job of smoothing this out. I guess
It does.
it's the swinginess of the experience that I am kind of more and more often, as with a player and a GM, less enjoying. I'm really glad that we're talking about Mutants and Masterminds, because I'm not saying this is the best. It's my favorite. I like Mutants and Masterminds a lot, and I'll talk about why I enjoy it so much as a superhero system and a superhero game.
It's no longer my favorite, Rob, but just so listeners know, since this is a video podcast, Rob can see my first edition Mutants and Masterminds book, which is basically falling apart and may have been like the third or fourth role-playing game I bought. So it's no longer my favorite, but it's one I absolutely loved in the past and still love today. Still love the quote on the back of my Mutants and Masterminds first edition book. It's the best looking RPG product I've ever seen, bar none, says Mike Merles.
Wow.
Cool.
Mike Merles. Who's that? Don't know about that.
I don't know. But so we know it's an interesting role playing game. I don't think this will be the only superhero RPG that we'll talk about on this show. And I think it's a good one to start with because it gives us kind of a nice baseline that if we ever do an episode on Icons or the Sentinels role-playing game or Marvel superhero role-playing or Masks, we can compare those two.
Yeah, and I think it's a good place to start. I also want to mention I really like I was wrong. I forgot. I actually have played a superhero game in Savage Worlds, which I like a lot, which is again, like we've discussed, an actual just sort of a general role-playing system, but I like their rules for superheroes. They're a little bit lighter even than Mutants and Masterminds, but there's some things that they share, which we'll talk about later, that I really like.
And they have a superhero specific expansion book.
If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I'll keep you by my side with my superhuman might, Kryptonite.
So, a little bit of background, Rob, about Mutants and Masterminds. It's an OGL game, which I think we have generally avoided because, they're very similar to D&D. But it's made off of the D20 Open Gaming license. It emerged out of Green Ronin Press's True 20 system, which basically took D20 Dungeons & Dragons and smoothed a lot of things out, made them more obvious. Like, hey, have you ever wondered, like, why we have to have ability scores that go from 0 to 20 when really the only thing that matters is the modifier? Okay, let's just fix that.
Get rid of that. Yeah.
Let's reduce the number of skills. Hey, why do we have to have a million different spells that do other things? Why can't someone just have a spell casting power that does damage? And why do we have to have hit points? Hey, I heard a lot of people don't like to keep track of hit points. Maybe we can have a system where you just kind of see, okay, did this attack weaken me? Was I able to shrug it off? Or did it knock me out? We'll have a system for that. And so based on that True 20 kind of generic role-playing game system that Green Ronin Press came up, author Steve Kinzen put together the first edition of Mutants and Masterminds in the early aughts. And it is now on its third edition, and because it's from Green Ronin, there's about 1 billion supplements and pre-made adventures, which is not something, I want to bring that up because it's just not something you get with every role-playing system. Sometimes you get a really great system, and you're like, you know what? I'm busy. I'd like to buy a pre-made adventure. You're like, oh, sorry, there aren't any.
This is an unfortunate reality that bothers me a lot. I would like to play other games more often, but there's just so much available for D&D and 5th edition, especially, that often if I don't have time, it's just easier to run a 5th edition game. So any other TTRPG that's been out there for a while and has substantial supplements like Mutants and Masterminds is a big draw for me, and it's a good argument for this game.
There are so many supplements, and things from editions convert pretty easily, so that if you want like 4 or 5 books of villains, you can buy those. If you want setting books for the 1930s or mystical superheroes or superheroes in space, you can buy those. If you want adventure books, you can buy those. And before I get mad at myself, I want to make us clear, we're not knocking on cool games that are produced by smaller outfits, right? It's
no,
just,
those are great. It's just
great.
Unfortunate that you have to do
this is the
additional
way
work. Yeah, it's just
the economy works. And it sucks. Anyway,
no.
So,
okay, so let's talk about how the game works, because
let's start with mechanics then.
Yeah, mechanics, and I guess I don't know that we should talk too much about this, but I honestly really actually like the mechanics a lot, and so I do think that we should discuss them, because I think this is so interesting because it is so very close to D&D, but the changes that the authors of Mutants and Masterminds have made make it a fundamentally different game in a way that I actually really like a lot. So the core mechanic, and this is great. It's you roll a d20 versus a difficulty class. It's that simple. You do not have any other dice. You just have your d20. Everything you do, you will roll that d20 for. You compare your modifiers versus the difficulty class. Done and done.
The one way this makes, and it's got kind of the basic idea of the binary success and failure of 5e, but for certain checks, you can add degrees of success and failure. And you're just saying, did you beat the difficulty class of the check by 5, by 10, by 15, or did you fail by 5, 10, 15, 20, etc., right? And that'll add, for certain checks, extra bonuses or penalties.
And a lot of games have this degrees of success or degrees of failure, but they often make it a little bit nebulous what that means. It's not at all nebulous in Mutants and Masterminds. If there are degrees of failure or degrees of success, it's this happens instead of this, or you receive, this much of a penalty or this much of a bonus, that sort of thing. It's very, very easy to figure out what happens. This is one of the things I like about the game, is there are lots of rules in this book, but they, to me, make a lot of sense. Everything is easily referenced. Everything follows directly from something else. It's not, what am I trying to say here? The way that things are referenced makes sense, right? Like, you don't have, for example, one check that's called the same thing as another check, but they function differently in different contexts. Everything that is a check is a check. Everything is an ability is an ability. Everything that's a skill is a skill. An advantage is an advantage. A complication is a complication. And everything has very clear rules. You have to know a lot of rules, but once you know them, everything sort of fits together nicely.
And I think the best thing I could say about Mutants and Masterminds kind of basic thing is that if you have played basically any edition of Dungeons and Dragons made in the last 21 years, then it's pretty easy to get started reading the rules. If you haven't, if you're like someone who's like, I have played role-playing games but never Dungeons and Dragons, which, is probably not that many people, but some people, it may be a little more difficult to get a handle on the rules, because it's almost like this is the great advantage and disadvantage of Mutants and Masterminds is they took the cheat code of we know everyone knows this stuff. Let's move in this direction with it.
It's a great point about D&D, because this is going to make perfect sense to anybody who's played D&D, any edition. It is, Matt's absolutely correct, probably not going to be a great first RPG for anybody. And the reason is that if you're not familiar with D&D, it's kind of mathy. And I actually like that. I think that the way that the numbers function in this game are very, very like pleasing and direct. There's a whole system of ranks, which everything has a rank. Your abilities have ranks, your damage has ranks, and that makes it very, very easy to understand how something functions, how it relates to the die you're rolling. But it does require you have to get in that headspace. And if you're not used to calculating, D&D ability checks or whatever, it may be kind of a big step up. So that is something to bear in mind.
Yeah. The great advantage of the rank system. So Mutants and Masterminds, and this is, I think, just as good of a place as any to bring this up, is like an open-ended D20 system where everything your character can do, from their ability scores like strength or agility or dexterity to their skills to their supernatural powers like energy blast or shapeshift, has a rank, right? And if you have blast 10, that means your blast is 10 powerful. And there's a bunch of reference tables to determine what that means in both speed, what that could mean in speed, in size, in distance. And this is a great system for if you're like, I want to have a teleport power and I want to be able to teleport 100,000 miles at a time. A dungeon master can say, well, you need exactly this rank to have that.
Right.
There's a lot of superhero systems that are like, I'm super strong. But if you want to have a system that says, well, you're super strong enough to lift exactly 25 tons, then this is the system for you.
And you may or may not love that, but I think that I love it. I think that it's like you're like, I'm making a brawler. He can lift a car over his head. He has strength 5. And you look and you're like, great. He can not only lift a car over his head, he can lift a semi truck over his head. That's perfect. Or you scale his strength down. You want to make a guy who's got a laser blaster, and you're like, I think his laser blaster should be able to blow a hole in a concrete wall. And you can look at exactly what you need to design that character. So it is complicated, right? And when you get to the sort of character creation, you have this big pool of PowerPoints, and you really need to be smart about how you apportion them, because you can either like sink them into something you don't need or miss the mark. But given the time, you know exactly what you need to do to build the character in your mind, which is honestly one of my favorite things about this system. And it's not something that's easy to get in any other system, right? You're in full control for the most part, within the sort of like the power framework that the GM has provided for you. But you're in full control of what your character can do. You don't have to wait till you get to level 3 to cast, or level 5 to cast Fireball, right? Like you can be like, I want to cast Fireball, and you're like, I need to put X amount of power points into this skill to create a explosion this big or whatever. It's I love it. So you were going to talk about hero points and extra effort, which I like a lot, and I think this is a super awesome part of the game.
Right. This is a part of the game. You can really tell where this has benefited from having 15 years or so to work on this game and 3 additions, because they've always been a core part of the game, and they work. We're talking about the 3rd edition of the rules, by the way. I think we forgot to say that, but with this iteration of extra effort and hero points, they work really, really well. Extra effort is the concept that, like, hey, you really want to succeed at something. Like, you're like, gosh, I make attacks every round, or I use my powers every round, but this time I really want to succeed. It's really important. You can put extra effort into it and gain a rank in a power or resistance. You can re-roll the dice, always getting above an 11. You sort of treat any low roll as at least, as plus 10. So let's say you re-roll the dice and you get a 2, that's a 12. You get a 7, that's a 17. Pretty straightforward. You can add a bonus action with extra effort. And the cost of extra effort is that next turn you're fatigued, right? You have a little fatigue tracker. And so eventually, if you use too much extra effort, you're going to be down and out. So that's extra effort. What do you think about extra effort? It's something that I think is beautiful, can be stolen.
I love extra effort. I was reading this and I was thinking about how much I wish that this were a core part of more games, and especially Dungeons & Dragons. There are so many times when players are, well, I have 2 attacks, right? And they love it. Like their paladin makes 2 attacks, and when they hit, they feel awesome. But sometimes they miss. Sometimes they spend a whole turn and nothing happens. And even the most brilliantly designed 5th edition characters only have so many actions and will run out of spells, and sometimes they're just not going to feel very useful. And that's a bummer, especially when it takes so long to get around to your turn. Something like extra effort means that you never don't do something, right? If you really need to make something happen, you can push your character, on one turn and even maybe several. It feels so much more like you're in control and like you have an impact on gameplay. And I think it's great. I think it's terrific. I think that it also allows you to tell a little bit more of a dramatic story, right? Your hero pushes themselves over the edge to, save a friend or, chase down the villain. These are things that can happen in other games, but having a well-designed mechanic to give players some control over it, I think is just a terrific addition. I love extra effort.
Yeah, and it's something that D&D has sort of incorporated into its design with action points in 4th edition, with the fighter ability of
Action Surge
in 5th edition, and inspiration. But it's hard to just add this rule as is to 5th edition because it steps on the fighter's toes a little bit. But if your fighters get it too, maybe it's not so bad. Or if you take away the ability to take an extra action with extra effort and just add the other abilities, then it's pretty cool because
you could just borrow that. Yeah, you could just borrow it wholesale for 5th edition, and if you're worried about the fighter feeling eclipsed, just leave out the action part because the rest of it is more or less completely applicable. And
I feel like you have to have, or you don't have to, but it's really nice to have this type of mechanic in a superhero game. Cue the clip of Ryan Reynolds saying maximum effort in his cheesy voice, right? There's always a point in the story where the hero is going above and beyond and very much straining themselves to push their powers to the limit, and this represents it. Now, hand in hand with extra effort goes hero points. And hero points have evolved a lot since Mutants and Masterminds 5th edition. They are now a combination of something that allows you to take extra effort with no cost, so you don't get fatigued. They are you can use a hero point to modify your powers, like let a power do something it doesn't normally do, like, so you have fire energy blast. Well, I want to push myself to the limit and cause it to create a wall of fire, right? I've changed my thing. I can re-roll a dice, or I could edit a scene, counter an enemy's power with my power, get back up if I've been knocked out, or like even edit a scene, right? Oh, all of a sudden there's a car here that I can throw at the villain, right?
Yeah, and many of you are probably familiar with hero points. They're a part of many systems. I think there's still an alternate rule in 5th edition to include something like hero points or action points or something. And I think this is good. And I think most games should include something like this so that players have a pool of things that they can use to heroically alter
like
gameplay.
Bennies and Savage Worlds.
Bennies.
What makes them very different in Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, and this is different than previous editions, is that everyone starts every session with 1 hero point. They don't carry over. How you get them is DMs can, of course, award them at any time for people doing something cool or heroic, but you're supposed to be giving them out most frequently for players doing something risky related to their complications.
And we'll talk about those in a bit because I like this a lot. And this is one of my favorite things. I did want to mention my favorite use of hero points, and is the ability to edit the scene.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
This is so, And this works very well in a superhero game, but this could work in a lot of other games too, or a lot of other settings. But it's, like Matt said, there's a car you can throw. There's a chandelier hanging over the bad guys, and your knife thrower can knock it down. Or there's like a terminal you can hack to like turn the it's you're like, all right, what would be a cool thing for my hero to be able to interact with in this scene? And if it like fits and it works with the GM, it like really allows you to control the narrative in a really interesting way and create much more dramatic moments. It gives you things to do besides I attack or I use fire blast or whatever. I love this, and I think it really encourages creativity in an interesting way.
Yeah, this is the best way to mimic the sort of on-screen action that you see in every superhero comic book and movie. Oh no, the trolley car, the funicular car to Roosevelt Island is about to fall into the East River. I'm just barely holding on. Wait, hero point. Here comes a trash barge that's about to go under. And the Dungeon Master says, okay, it'll be there in 2 rounds if you can hang on.
Right.
Perfect. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't have that, it's really hard to do the superhero stuff, right?
Yes, it is. It is. So let's talk about
complications, right?
Complications.
So,
let's talk about hero, design, and then specifically complications as a part of this. So
yeah, Mutants and Masterminds gives you a bunch of archetypes that you can build a hero with, or as I imagine a lot of players want to do, you can build things basically from scratch. And at the core of every hero is their powers and abilities. But I think since we were talking about hero points, let's talk about complications, right?
Right.
Which, unlike everything else in this game, don't have like very specific stats for everything. They are very general and fall into 2 categories of like motivation and other.
Right. And these are distinctly role-playing elements, and this is interesting because there's even like a little box in the book that talks about this. In other games with, I guess, like negative perks or flaws,
including earlier editions of Mutants and Masterminds,
which they learned from. And Matt keeps making this good point, which I do want to dwell on, is that they learned from things that didn't work and they made updates. And a lot of RPGs, including ones that we like, will just keep everything mostly the same. They have a lot of sacred cows, as we'd like to talk about. And Mutants and Masterminds has been willing to make changes to things to make the game better in ways that I really respect. And there's a good point here, and I really like Mutants and Masterminds. The book has these little like gray boxes where they discuss sort of like, it's called Under the Hood. It talks about mechanics. And the problem with flaws or complications or negative perks, right, that you can take at the beginning is you really can front load your character with a ton of stats, right? In games where you can take a penalty and get an additional
10 character points or
yeah,
plus 2 to something. Yeah.
These can be abused. And the great thing about complications is that it adds it stretches this out over the life of your character, right? So you take a complication, right? You've got a temper, right? Or you have a code of honor, or you have a responsibility, or an enemy who hates you, or somebody who you have to protect. And then throughout the course of the game, those complications will arise, and that will be challenging for your character to overcome them, but you'll receive hero points as a reward. And I think this is a really great way to encourage role playing. I think it's a terrific tool.
Right. This is the primary way you receive hero points, and there's no limit to the complications you can have. So this allows players to, for example, if you want to build a straightforward, like Superman can fly and is super strong hero, and their one complication is they will always protect civilians in harm's way, that's done. And that will come up often enough that it's fine. But if you want to take if you want to be like Spider-Man or something and have a million complications, you want to have guilt, you want to have real life responsibilities, if you want to have a rogues list 30 villains long, and you want to show up during character creation and be like, Dungeon Master, here are the 30 supervillains that dislike me, that's fine, because it doesn't imbalance the game, because complications only reward hero points as often as they come up. So
Right.
If they don't come up, they don't matter that session. And when they do come up, then you get a hero point, right? It's encouraging players to sort of put themselves into harm's way, make suboptimal decisions at the table, and make what could be a straightforward story more complicated and interesting.
Yeah. I think this is just a really well thought out mechanic. I think it encourages much deeper character creation in a very uncomplicated way, to be honest. What is a little bit more complicated is the rest of character creation.
Right.
So I really like this, and I think it makes sense. But you either can pick an archetype, which actually is not that complicated, and maybe you should do most of the time, because it just kind of gives you a package of abilities and powers to work with. But I think most players are going to want to customize their character more. And the way that it works is you just kind of have a big pool of points. Like literally you start with, whatever your power level is, and 10 is kind of the baseline, which is 150 power points. And so that represents all of your attributes, skills, equipment, abilities, powers, whatever. And it's not impossible to put that together, but it definitely requires a lot of planning to make sure that those are spent intelligently.
Right. This is definitely do you want to create a character? If you want to create one from scratch, this is going to be a 2 or 3 hour experience for you. Now, the archetypes do cover basically most of the things that you can immediately think of when you think superheroes. But that being said, there are so many options, right? And despite the system, like taking D20 and knocking it down, like I think there are only 10 skills, for example. And there are a gazillion powers, right? That you can have.
This is good and this is bad, but actually this is great from my opinion, but powers are almost infinitely modifiable, right? You can add effects and flaws and limitations and adjust their rank, and even add sort of like packages of effects. And again, I love this. I think this is so awesome. It allows you to create any sort of combination of characters and character ideas and be very specific about like what types of things you can do. And it does so without requiring a ton of fuzziness or negotiation with your GM. But it means that, especially if you're going to create a character where you want them to be able to create, I don't know, box-shaped force fields or something like that, you're going to have to spend a little bit of time figuring out how that works within the rules.
Exactly. Okay, box-shaped force fields. So that's going to be create. That's going to be the extra stationary. That's going to be the selective, right?
Yes,
so it's,
right.
It's, yeah.
Yeah.
You can, and the other thing is there's probably like 2 other ways if your like character creates box-shaped force fields to do that through the system, and they all kind of end up more or less the same in game effects. And
this is great to me. Again, I love this. I think this is so much fun. This is the kind of game that I like to play. But I am always trying to be aware of how this, may appear to other people, how it may be challenging, to be a GM for. I think that this game is very well balanced, and I think that it offers a lot of choices without being overwhelming. That being said, if you're not coming in with a super clear character concept, then you may be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of choices. And this is I think the thing that I have to bear in mind is like I can immediately come up with like 6 character concepts that I would love to explore in Mutants and Masterminds, but somebody may just want to be Batman, or not even that. They may just want to be like, I'm a strong guy, and they may not have like a super clear vision in their mind, but they want to play a superhero game. And in that case, maybe they just give them an archetype and they'll have a good time. But
Yes.
there's
I am the Bat.
there's a risk, right? Because there are so many options for adjusting powers and changing the way that they work, which is, in my opinion, good, but can be overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, this would not work at all if this game did not have the hero archetypes to show you what, for example, okay, wait, a speedster, you like turn to the, like the Flash or Quicksilver or something, you turn to the power speed, and that's not going to cut it to do the things that you need to do. There's a couple feats and enhanced abilities that you should take, so you can get run on water and run up walls and all that kind of stuff. So,
but it works. The thing is, here's the thing. This is a thing that I complain about in other games, and I want to praise Mutants and Masterminds for doing. It works. It all fits together, in my opinion. It all fits together correctly, right? There's some areas where it's a little confusing. There are limitations on character creation and powers that are a little bit, mathematically kind of confusing for me, but generally not something you have to worry about a ton, and there are rules for it. And I suspect that very savvy players can pretty easily create a superhero that is busted if they want to, and
maybe it's tough.
Maybe
it's tough
not,
because, well, here's one of the other things is in character creation, it's open-ended, right? The dungeon master sets a power level, which like 10, like default superheroes, 12, you're like the Justice League, probably. 8, you're probably more like the X-Men or something like that, where your powers are not, for the most part, overwhelming. You're still just kind of a person. But
true.
The Dungeon Master can also set a limit to how many ranks you put in a power, right? And that could be different than the power level. If you want to be like, all right, you can have one power that is really, really good. Or, no, we're going to limit everything to about what the power level is, so that in order to overcome enemies, you're going to have to come up with some clever ways to team up and do some stuff. That is cool and interesting. So there's also like infinite flexibility in what the limits to character creation is. And if you're a first-time Dungeon Master, that can be tough to be like, what do I want to put it on? The other advantage of this is just kind of in the nuts and bolts of the system is they've definitely moved away from earlier editions that were very faithful to the D20 system. They've added some new abilities. For example, dexterity has been split between dexterity and agility. Good thing dexterity did too much stuff. They've added the fighting ability, which is just your bonus to most attack rolls, which is super, super good. And like, if you want to make, I think the fun thing about this system, if you want a very numbers centric game where every ability is spelled out, you can be like I don't know, a Captain America or a Batman style, where your powers are not that good, but you always hit with your attacks because you're the world's best martial artist. And sure, you don't hit as hard as Thor, but yeah, you've got all these combat tricks, right? There's all these feats you can take to be good at that.
Yeah, and I mean the great thing about this big pool of points is that you don't have to take a certain class. You don't have to, there's not a lot of like prerequisites or gates that you have to pass through, right? You say, I want to be Captain America, and I throw a shield and I always hit, and I'm strong but not that strong, and everything you need is there in the book, and it's not that hard to build those specific things if you have the points for it. If you want to be Iron Man at the peak of abilities and have like 17 different weapon systems and flight and, invincible armor, then you'll probably only get halfway there. But you also have a pathway as you level up to be like, these are the things that I want to add on to my battle suit to be Iron Man when I'm at, power level 12 or 14 or 16 or whatever. So maybe that's right. I'm not sure it's actually all that easy. I spent a little bit of time and didn't come up with any like obvious broken combinations, but I would be worried about players doing something that
well, here's the
thing. The GM has to know, and this is kind of one of the downsides that I was going to get to. The GM has to know all sorts of rules. The players only need to focus on what their character can do. And so it would be a lot easier to be like, how obscenely strong can I get within the power level that the GM has prescribed or something like that. And
right. But here's the flip side of that is Mutants and Masterminds encourages you, because you are superheroes, to be insanely powerful. And then this is one of my critiques of the 3rd edition book. There's not enough NPC things, examples of enemy heroes. But if you buy the Deluxe Game Master's Guide, you'll have some. And hey, one of a sample challenge for a regular party is one that, with the base default level of powers, the players cannot hurt this villain, right? You shoot an energy blast and it pings off of them. You punch them, their neck cracks and they turn back and they look at you. And the only way to, of course, defeat them is to use their combined abilities, create advantages, use hero points, team up attacks, etc., etc. So the game encourages you in some ways to be broken, right? Because, of course, if the enemy sends 30 ninjas at you, you should be able to kill them, or not kill them. We're superheroes. Disable them. If I twist his neck a little further, will that knock him out more? Yeah. That will. Right.
Well, let's
kill them all in a round or two, right? Because that's fun.
Right. Well, let's talk a bit about the actual gameplay, the mechanics, and then let's talk about being a GM for this, because I think those are there's a lot more we could talk about, but those are, I think, important for anybody who might want to play, or anybody who wants to borrow from this for D&D or for another game. So, like Matt said, this is based on a D20 system, and the rounds and actions are probably going to be very familiar to 5th edition players or players of D&D in general. Mm-hmm. You have the same actions: standard, move, free, reaction. But that's, again, kind of like where the similarities end. And I want to talk about a lot of things, but I want to talk about attacks and doing damage, because this works way differently than it does in many games, and especially D&D, and I like it, and I want to talk about it. So how does this work?
First thing we'll say is the action rounds is very familiar to anyone who's played Dungeons & Dragons. You roll initiative, you take turns, you have a standard and a move action, free action, etc., etc. Unlike other editions of D&D, is like everyone kind of gets some of the basic special attacks for free. Do you want to do an all-out attack and take a penalty to your defense? You can. Do you want to do a careful attack? You can do that. So there's a little more you might never use these, but options for you. But then damaging people works differently. It works when you hit someone with a successful attack. You basically, again, trigger the core mechanic. No one has hit points. Instead, that person makes a damage resistance check, right? Which is their toughness versus how much damage they took plus 15.
And this is one of the areas where degrees of success and failure come in. Success, nothing happens, but based on how far you or how much you fail your toughness check by, for example, you can, an attack hits and you are the bad guy. If you fail by a little bit, you take a penalty, you're hurt. If you fail by a lot, you're straight up incapacitated. It's that easy, right? So if a mook comes running up to your big tough bruiser and your bruiser swings at him, there's a pretty good mathematical chance that it's just going to knock him out in one hit, right? Like, just probably 9 times out of 10, it's just he's going to swat the guy and take him out in a single attack.
Yeah. And the same is true in reverse, right? You will find things that are just, okay, and this is by design, right? If you are creating a Superman type character and someone shoots you with a handgun, it doesn't matter. You don't have to make a check because it is impossible for you to fail.
Right. And this is, by design, and it captures the superhero experience, right? In D&D, an army of 200 goblins firing bows is probably going to take down your party just numerically at some point, but if you're Superman, 200 guys firing guns at you isn't going to do a thing. And that's how the game is meant to function, and this models it very, very well. It also means you don't have to keep track of hit points, which I love.
That's right. The only thing you have to keep track of is if you, really nothing happens even if you fail a damage check. You get a -1, but only to other damage checks. Your character doesn't become less effective. They just become more likely to fall if they're hit in the future, right? And they have to fall by a lot to become incapacitated. Right. So this is, you go from always full effectiveness to you could be dazed for a round or you could be staggered, but it's pretty likely you might go from full effectiveness to just knocked out. Now, getting knocked out is not super hard to recover from, in that you can always spend a hero point to get back up on your next turn, or if anyone has any healing powers, it's heal, you're kind of back to full pretty easily.
Right. And this is a bit like Savage Worlds, right? It's pretty hard for hero characters to be knocked down. If there is a bad round of combat and you do get knocked down, you've got hero points to get back up. It means that nobody's gonna end up defeated by accident, basically. Like, if it happens, you have had lots of opportunities to either resist, escape, make rolls, try it. No one's going to feel like they were taken down too easily, most likely. It's a well-designed system that models, I think, combat, no matter how long it takes, and allows for injury and damage without, having to keep track of a pool of hit points. And it also lets the players feel like superheroes. Also,
you don't die, right?
Right.
You can kill a superhero if you want to, if you agree. All right. If you've been incapacitated and then have someone, kill them, but there's the rules are not set up for that. The rules are set up for superhero type stories where, Iron Man's not going to die. We need to make more Iron Man comics. Only if you want your character to be killed by this is this going to happen.
Right.
Which, speaking of, that's kind of more of a game mastery thing. Let's talk about some of the game master advice here. There's, I think, some pretty decent advice for the pace and the tone you want and nice rule summary. But I would say, compared to previous editions, the game master advice here is pretty light, mostly because it was moved to another book.
Yeah, so this is really my only complaint about Mutants and Masterminds. I think, as I've said plenty of times, I think it is very well designed. It, as I was reading it, everything made sense. I didn't find myself confused or frustrated or having any trouble understanding the point of anything. But as I was reading it, the one thing that I kept thinking was that as a GM, there is a lot that you have to be aware of and responsible for, and a lot of rules that you have to know. And unlike, and this is a thing that I say about a lot of games, but unlike others, it's usually easy to find them. But it is, in some ways, a big lift for the game master. And Matt's right. There is some good advice in the game master section. It's pretty short though. There's not a ton of information here, and there are other books, which is great, but it's a little disappointing that there's not more here. It really doesn't give you. I wouldn't have any trouble making a game, but it doesn't really give you anywhere near enough to get started if you're not already very familiar with game mastering.
Yeah, you're going to want the deluxe Game Master's Guide, I think, if you want to run this for any length of time, because not only are there no villains listed in this book, earlier editions usually gave you a sample of, I don't know, a dozen or 2 dozen. There's again, the advice for running different types of adventures or plot hooks is pretty minimal. Earlier editions had a sample starting adventure, which, is always nice when you get like a, 200-page book that you could put 10 pages of it to helping people get started playing. And third edition Mutants and Masterminds does not have this.
I do like this framework for creating a series, which is basically a campaign, and it gives you 3 things to think about, which I think this is actually very useful, is scale, setting, and style, right? These are the things to bear in mind, right? So scale goes from like local to multiversal. Setting is things like modern, futuristic, historical, and then style is light, dark, grayscale. There are probably some others in there, but those are 3 good examples, I think, to run by your players, to think about when you're planning it. I think that these are excellent baselines for any campaign in any setting and any TTRPG to think about. And I think this is a great place to start. It's just not a ton of information.
Yeah, I think building on that, like the other thing a dungeon master of any superhero game would want to consider is that the biggest, at least to me, the biggest like interesting part of superhero campaigns is if it's a superhero story that involves more than one superhero, front and center in the story is the superheroes' relationships with each other. Not like with the plot or even the villain. It's more about like, can Ant-Man get along with Beetle-Man or whatever, right? And there's not really anything. You could add a complication, but there's not like any advice for really running that, and there's not a lot in the gameplay mechanics that supports that. Whereas other games, the new Sentinels role-playing game, Marvel superheroic role-playing, or Masks have like explicit mechanics for like having a falling out with your party members or for teaming up, right? This one, it doesn't have that. And now you could take the point of like, hey, that's role-playing among player characters. We want to not have a rule sort of preventing that from happening. And that's another perspective you can have. But then again, that's something you would want to talk about at your table and figure out how to do so that you can tell a cool superhero story.
Yeah, I do agree that is an important part of superhero stories, and I would have liked a little bit more support for teamwork, teaming up, team interaction. But yeah, that is something that you can add or borrow from other systems. But Matt's correct. This is actually a critical part of the superhero story that should probably be incorporated into any superhero TTRPG.
Yeah, and again, I think this is the superhero. If I'm thinking of my superhero RPGs, and if you want to play a superhero game and you're wondering which one to pick, this is the one that it's not as rules intensive as Hero 6th edition system Champions, but it is more towards that simulationist end of the spectrum. But I would say again, I'll hit this point again. There are some great supplements out there. Setting books, Freedom City is excellent. A lot of the adventures. One of my favorite authors, Crystal Frazier, has written some that are really good. It's got a lot of supplements.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, middle of the road. There's lots of rules light superhero RPGs. They're very, very good. And honestly, I think that's actually I think rules light is very good for superhero games in a lot of ways. But if you want something a little bit more crunch, this is a good place to start. And it's not as crunchy as, like Matt had said, Hero 6. And
yeah, you got to decide with your players, like, do we want to play a superhero game where, like, you have like 5 stats, or one where you have 100 stats, right? And decide which of those is going to make you more happy.
Right. It also, the clear sort of, I guess, use case for Mutants and Masterminds is you have a group that likes 5th edition, but you want to play something else, especially you want to play a superhero game. It's an easy switch, in my opinion. I think this would be a very easy thing to teach 5th edition players, and it would not be a hard transition. I have seen, this is a thing that we can discuss in greater detail. More and more often people are hacking 5th edition to play different types of games, which is a thing you can do. That's fine. You, in my opinion, shouldn't and do not have to, if you don't mind buying another book, do that for superheroes, because this is such an, in my opinion, and maybe other players would find this more challenging, but I think this would be such an easy shift to make from playing a 5th edition game to playing a superhero game. And I think that this is sort of like the ideal reason for this. And I hope a lot of more people do that, because, again, I love 5th edition and I'm happy people are playing it, but it's clear that a lot of people want to play something else or want to play a different setting and feel a little constrained. And this is, I think, such an easy transition for especially people who just started with 5th edition. I think this would be very, very easy to pick up.
The last piece of advice I would give for superhero games, Rob, is that especially with one like this that has a lot of rules and powers and everything is detailed out, is that you, in order for the game to not get boring, you as a dungeon master always need to turn up the superhero encounters to 11. The quasi Justice League of your world is brainwashed. You have to take them out. There's 100 copies of a time traveling thief from alternate timelines stealing everything in the city. It needs to be, space pirates are invading,
alien invasion, or interdimensional alien invasion. Yeah.
It needs to be big and weird, and if you go with something like the plot of the first Iron Man movie from Marvel Cinematic Universe, it will feel boring, where it's like, oh no, I gotta fight some terrorists. Oh no, I've got to fight a guy who has the same powers as me. It needs to be weird and big and crazy.
And I like that, and I think this is, I guess, what I'll close with, because I was thinking about this as I was rereading this book, is that, and maybe listeners, you can tell me if this is just a me opinion or what, but I find myself both as a game master and as a player really yearning for more player agency, more opportunities for players to have heroic moments. And I'm more and more interested in sort of, I guess, these maybe pulpier action types of RPGs. You know, this is what I love about Savage Worlds, and I loved this about Mutants and Masterminds, is things like extra effort, things like action points, or even just having maneuvers and abilities and special actions written into the game so you don't have to invent in your mind, you know, what your character is doing, and allowing players to have more heroic moments and have a little bit more control over the pace of combat or the course of events. And I think that Mutants and Masterminds does a great job of this, and that's because it's a superhero RPG. But more and more often, I kind of want to borrow those elements for all games because I think that that's a lot more fun.
Yeah, well said. You know, you got to get wacky with it. You got to borrow the players first. Players have all these extra things they can do to succeed, and then the times they fail, you immediately soften the blow by giving them hero points, right? So that they succeed next time, right?
Yeah.
The other piece of advice that you kind of have to consider with superhero role playing. This is getting really general, and we're running long on time.
That's all right.
Is like superhero adventures normally start with the superheroes are good guys. They're sitting around waiting for something bad to happen, right? And villains or some other threat are disrupting things, and superheroes have to stop them. And I think that works very well in that it's easy for you as the dungeon master to come up with something that happens. What can be really exciting is if you get to the sort of more Fantastic Four type superheroes, or like, all right, your job is to explore the multiverse, or and look for something, or do your own thing, establish something, and that can be a little harder to do. This sort of player motivated game in a superhero thing, but it takes a little more time, I think, to get there, just because of the limitations of the genre. Like you have infinite powers, you can do whatever you want. That's too much choice. What should we do?
Right. And that's I think the good thing and the difference I think about this than running a standard fantasy campaign in 5th edition is that there's far more choice, which generally I think is good. However, that's just because it's the kind of choice that I like. When I see 15 different types of mustard in the grocery store, I have a panic attack. So choice isn't always good. So it's not necessarily...
Well, Rob, you need a yellow mustard, you need a Dijon, and probably like a German mustard or something else. They're spicy. You have that in your fridge. You're good to go. You're not going to need anything else unless you're just a mustard aficionado. Solved your problem there for you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah. Never going to panic about mustard ever again. So even though I like this type of choice, this may not be something that your players love, and it's going to be harder to create, I think, long term. And actually, you can draw a lesson here from superhero movies. It's hard to keep the challenge up and to keep things fresh as your players become more powerful, right? It's difficult to have villains that are actually threatening. It's difficult to have circumstances that actually feel like they require the attention of a superhero team. It's not impossible. It just
you gotta just turn things up. You gotta have really crazy things that just whatever it is, it's invulnerable to everything.
Right.
It's actually your father from another time dimension. That's
good
same powers as you, but better.
Good superheroes go bad, and then suddenly you're fighting, Dark Superman, and that's a big deal. But yeah, these are not huge insurmountable problems, but they are different ones than you will face when you are running a more standard D&D style campaign.
Last thing I'll mention is that so we talked about Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition deluxe. There's also the deluxe Game Master's Guide. I should also bring up there's Mutants and Masterminds Basic Heroes Handbook, again by Crystal Fraser, which is all the things we just talked about pared down to about 100 pages and change. And I would almost prefer that over what we read. Very few. There's less powers, but all the powers that you would typically want are there. And
I
you
would.
can always...
I agree with you. I think that would be better. And then I don't know, like a $5 supplement that's just like powers. And then if your players really want a bunch of different powers to choose from, you can buy that and give them to them or whatever. But I think that I agree. I think that took up more space than it needed to in the book, and there would have been other things that could have used that space. But
yeah. So there's a more basic version if you're into that. There's also, I don't think it was updated for 3rd edition. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but for 2nd edition, there was a DC, as in Detective Comics version of Mutants and Masterminds. I don't think that went anywhere. If there were any other supplements to that, but there was a DC version of Mutants and Masterminds too.
Okay, Matt. Well, time for us to
say goodbye,
leap tall buildings, fly off into the sunset, retire to our fortress of solitude.
Right. Listen, we won't be back for another week, but during that time, feel safe, citizen, because we are above the atmosphere. The sun is like kind of behind us and shooting like a little halo effect as we slowly roll over, looking at that fragile blue dot.
That's right.
We call Earth Prime, knowing that we are here to protect you and answer your questions. Hey, do you want to hear us review a different superhero system in the future? Let us know which one, because there's a goddamn million of them.
That's right. Let us know. Write us at dmofnone@gmail.com. Add us on Twitter at dmofnone. Feel free to join our Discord, link in the show notes. Find us on Patreon at patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for writing in. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep rolling them dice.
There used to be a graying tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's the high and not the pill. But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen?